We welcome you all on behalf of APA Engineering for this webinar on the current evolving topic of breaking down TSCA Section 8a7 PFAS reporting. We'll begin with the housekeeping guidelines. Here, everyone but speakers are muted at this time. This meeting is being recorded and it will be shared after the session is over. There will be a survey post this session for you all to complete to get a copy and additional documents about today's webinar. You can also send your enquiries to apacompliance@apaengineering.com if you have any questions or comments, so that we'll get back to you within 2 to 3 days. Coming to the presenters, I, Maniammai, and Renuka from our team are the two speakers for today's webinar. Moving to the next slide, here we would like to showcase some introduction about our firm AP Engineering, like who we are and what we do. We focus mainly on compliance, engineering, sourcing, and software services. As a global service provider for compliance activities, we offer services related to regulations like ROS, REACH, IMDS, TSCA, and much more. Here, let me walk through the agenda for today's webinar. We'll start with the basics of PFAS and TSCA, and then we'll focus on the roots of TSCA 8a7 and what did EPA propose about TSCA 8a7 and the timelines proposed by EPA also. Continuing to that, we'll get to know about the scope and non-scope of PFAS, that is, who are all exempted under this rule. Next, we'll move into the topic of reporting standards and requirements. After that, we'll see about the confidential business information and how it is related to TSCA 8a7. After that, we'll also look about what is duplicative reporting and what is meant by joint submission also. And finally, conclusion. Let's explore this subject more technically. In this slide, we'll see about the basics of PFAS and TSCA. Coming to PFAS, it's becoming highly important nowadays to know about it. PFAS, which is perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, they are the group of synthetic chemicals that have been in use since 1940s itself. These are synthesized for many different uses ranging from firefighting foams to the coatings to clothes and furnitures, also to the food contact substances and also to the manufacture of other chemicals and products. They are used in a wide variety of products including electronics, pipes, cookings and bakewares, textiles, automotive products, sports articles, and much more, which may be imported into US as a finished article. PFAS can be released to the environment throughout the life cycle of a product, starting from manufacturing or in processing stage, in distribution stage, use, and also in disposal period too. Coming to TSCA, as we all know, it is Toxic Substances Control Act, which is a law part of an environmental protection agency, and it is laid down by US Congress in 1976, which requires reporting, record keeping, the testing requirements, and also the restrictions related to the chemical substances or their mixtures. This law regulates and screens all the chemicals produced or imported into US with the intent of ensuring that the risk posed to human health and the environment by importing such chemical substances. In simple words, we can say that they may be present in any forms of the chemicals like either organics or inorganics, or they may be present in variable compositions of the substances, or they may be in complex reaction products and also in biological materials. Some of the important toxic substances subject to this TSCA regulation include asbestos, PCBs, formaldehyde, lead, etc. Moving on to the next, we shall see how TSCA 8a7 came into picture. On December 2019, the National Defense Authorization Act, that is NDAA, for the fiscal year 2020 was signed into law, and this NDAA amended TSCA 8A by adding this TSCA 8A7 section. Under this section, EPA requires any person who manufactures or import or who have already manufactured or imported either PFAS or PFAS containing articles in any year since January 2011, they have to electronically report the information regarding the PFAS identity, their production volumes, or for what they have been used for. Either they are used for industrial purposes or for commercial purposes or any of the consumer purposes, and also the information related to their byproducts, worker exposure during the manufacturing, their disposal information, and also any existing information related to the environmental as well as the health effects. This act mainly encompasses the following three activities. They are the domestic manufacturing of PFAS, then the importing of PFAS either in the form of substance or in the form of mixtures, and also the importing of articles containing PFAS. Moving to the next, here we'll see about what EPA proposed about this rule, TSCA 8a7 section. EPA published, as mentioned before, EPA published the reporting and record keeping requirements of PFAS manufacturers under this rule. EPA also mentioned that any entities who have manufactured or imported PFAS in any year since 2011 will have 18 months of time following the effective date of this rule. And for small manufacturers, it is given as 24 months of time from the effective date of this rule based on this 40 CFR 704.3. Like coming to CFR, its Code of Federal Regulations, it is a federal register which says about the rules given by the federal government, and it is divided by 50 titles representing the broad areas of many topics. Like in that, this title 40 and this part 704.3 explains who are all the manufacturers coming under this small manufacturer category. The EPA have given three categories for defining a particular manufacturer as a small manufacturer, and that is related to total annual sales and also related to inflation. That is, if a manufacturer, including importer of a substance, is small, that is, if its total annual sales, when combined with those of its parent company, are less than $120 million, and if their annual production or the importation volume of a particular substance were not greater than 45,400 kilograms, then they can be considered as small manufacturers. Coming to the second case, if a manufacturer or the importer of a substance is small, that is, their total annual sales, when combined with those of their parent company, are less than $12 million, irrespective of the quantity of the substances produced or imported, then they also considered under this category. And the third one, coming to the third one, EPA shall make use of the producer price index for chemicals, and they may need to adjust the total annual sales for some of the manufacturers. So, whoever comes under any of these three categories are defined as small manufacturers, and they will get 24 months of time from the effective date of this rule. EPA also proposed a 5-year record keeping period following the submission date. And we need to note that the EPA did not propose any reporting exemptions or the production volume thresholds or the concentration exemptions, like how much amount of PFAS is manufactured, they have to be reported mandatory under this rule. Moving to the next slide, here we'll see about the timeline for each stages under this rule. EPA published the final rule on October 11th, 2023, and this became effective from November 13, 2023. And the submission period for most of the manufacturers, for all the manufacturers into CDX, will get started by November 12th, 2024, and it gets ended by 8th May 2025 for most of the entities other than the small manufacturers. And for small manufacturers, as we saw before, it gets extended and it will get closes by 10th November 2025. These are all the timelines under this rule. Coming to the next slide, we will dive into the topic of what type of PFAS substances are need to be reported under this rule. This reporting is required for all PFAS under the section 40 CFR 705. Based on this section, if an article or a mixture is comprised of 2 or more reportable PFAS, then the manufacturer or the importer must report on each PFAS they are manufacturing or importing. PFAS is defined as including any one of these three structural definitions, then they can be considered as they need to be reported under this rule. Any TSCA chemical substances meeting this definition which has been manufactured since January 2011 are reportable. The manufacturers don't need to report on substances that do not meet any of these structural definition. For example, if we see fluoropolymers, they meet the structure and they are under scope, so they need to be reported when they are manufactured or imported. EPA has identified at least 1,462 PFAS substances under this structural definition, including all the PFAS listed as active on TSCA inventory by February 2023, and all the PFAS substances with the TSCA Section 5 low volume exemption claims. In the next slide, we'll see about the exemptions, like who are all exempted under this rule and they no need to report under this rule. The person who have only processed or distributed in commerce or who only used or disposed of the PFAS are not required to report under this rule unless they also have manufactured the PFAS for any commercial purpose. Certain activities are considered like the non-commercial R&D activities, for example, the scientific experimentation or the analysis conducted by the academic or the government or any independent not-for-profit research organizations, unless the activities for eventual commercial purposes are not subjective for this reporting. This may also include certain waste management companies if they have imported PFAS in a waste or produced PFAS at their site during the disposal of another chemical substances or the mixtures. So they are also not required to report. And some of the companies that import the municipal solid waste for the disposal or the destruction are also considered here, because EPA understands that importers of the municipal solid waste streams for the disposal or the destruction would not have any records or data that they had been imported the PFAS or any other information relevant to reporting under this section. No PFAS was listed as hazardous waste and they are not subjected to the notification requirements if they have been coming under this RCRA Act, that is Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. So, other than these sites, considering all these sites, other than who are all coming under, other than these sites which may have some relevant information regarding this PFAS contents in waste, when they are imported outside this municipal solid waste or any other recycling or reuse stage, they are need to be reported. Moving on to the next. Here, we will get to know about what is reporting standard for this rule, TSCA Section 8a7. It is important to know about the reporting standard, which means the entities are required to exercise the certain levels of due diligence in gathering the information on the PFAS substances. To comply with this rule, the companies are required to conduct an inquiry within as well as outside their organizations to fill in their gaps about the knowledge of the substances. The inquiries may also include the phone calls or the email inquiries to the upstream suppliers or to the downstream suppliers or the employees involved in the import or the production or in any marketing of the PFAS also. But, however, if the entity does not know or reasonably make estimates for certain data elements, then they can put the response as NKRA, that is not known or reasonably ascertainable. In this way, the entity must put effort into completing the reporting form. Initially, the entities are required to identify whether the PFAS meets any of the structural definition as explained before, and then they also need to check whether the PFAS manufactured and imported for the commercial purpose since 2011. When these two are satisfied, then they have to check what types of reporting forms they must use for reporting under this rule. EPA proposed 3 forms for the manufacturers or the importers under this rule. Those are standard form, streamlined form for article importers, and streamlined forms for small quantity R&D importers and manufacturers. Here, with this, we have seen some brief note on the forms, and those will be explained in detail in the upcoming slides further. Now, it's a time for quick poll so that you could express your views by answering this. You could use this stage for answering this question by expressing your views. Okay, we are closing the poll now. And from here, Renika will explain the remaining part of this webinar.
Good morning to all. I want to thank you all for joining this webinar. Myself Renuga. I'm going to present you about reporting requirements under this rule. Before getting into the reporting requirements, it is important to know about the reporting forms and the information required for the form. Let's explore it. If any entity meets the scope of this rule, that is PFAS manufactured or imported since 2011 for commercial purpose, then this rule provides three reporting forms to share info, such as standard form, streamline article importer form, and R&D form. If any entity meets the scope of this rule, the first step of the entity is to find out whether they are eligible for streamline article importer form. As we all know, there is no exemption for article importers. EPA consider that providing exemption to article importers leads to gaps in their knowledge on PFAS and also fails to have all information under this rule. However, the public input is some article importers may know or reasonably certain information requested on the standard form, but not all the article importers. Therefore, EPA finalized a reporting option for article importers to share data through a streamlined form if they do not know or cannot reasonably certain information requested on the standard form. So, if any entity imports the PFAS as a part of an article, then entity should use a streamlined article importer form for reporting. For this form, all the information required that is requested under the standard form, except byproduct, work exposure, and disposal method information. If any entity is not eligible for the article importer form or not imported the article, the second option is streamlined R&D form. EPA believes that the entity that manufacture or import the PFAS for R&D is purely for laboratory purpose. And also EPA believes that they are not aware of other information requested in standard form. Therefore, EPA provided another streamlined reporting option to R&D manufacturer. If any entity manufacture or import the PFAS exclusively for R&D purpose, less than 10 kg per year, then entity must use a streamlined R&D form for reporting their information. For R&D form, the required info are parent company and site information, chemical specific info, production volume, and information on whether imported PFAS is physically present at the site. Finally, if the entity doesn't qualify for both streamlined form, then it must provide information using the standard form. And information required for these forms are parent company and site information, chemical specific info, industrial processing and use info, consumer and commercial use info, manufacturing info, byproduct work exposure and disposal method info. Let's see the requested information in detail. First information requested under this rule is higher level US parent company info, such as US parent company name, 9-digit DUNS number, and address. Similarly, it requires site information where that PFAS is manufactured and imported. Infos are site name, DUNS number, street address, city, country, state, zip code, and 6-digit NIC code. Finally, this rule requires technical contact information so that EPA can contact the person for clarification of the information submitted. For chemical specific information, this rule requires chemical name, trade name or common name, generic chemical name, molecular structure, physical form, and a chemical substance identifying number, such as CAS number, TSCA action number, LVE CAS number. Next, this rule requires category of use of each PFAS or PFAS mixture. For industrial processing and use, this rule requires info on the industrial sector. Then info on the way the substance is processed and used on the site, such as substance being used as a reactant or added to a mixture or reaction product before its distribution or incorporated into the article or just undergone repackaging and used as a manufacturing aid. Finally, this rule requires info on a functional category, which means the purpose of using the substance. Example, PFAS may be used as a lubricating agent or used as a flame retardant. Here, the functional category is lubricating agent and flame retardant. For consumer and commercial use, this rule requires info on the maximum concentration. Then info on the consumer and commercial products in which the PFAS is used, that is product categories. For example, if chemical substance present in personal care products, which is used for cleaning, grooming, improving the skin, hair or teeth, then the entity must provide product category as liquid body soap, liquid hand soap and solid bar soap. And also, this rule requires confirmation on whether the product is used for consumer use or for commercial use or for a both. And also, confirmation on used in product intended for use by children, which means the chemical substance or mixture is used in a product that is specifically targeted for children age group 14 or below. Coming to manufacturing information, this rule requires the entity to share info on the percentage of production value. Then confirmation on whether PFAS is site limited, which means a chemical substance is manufactured and processed within the site and it is not distributed outside the site. Then it requires info on the total volume of PFAS recycled from a waste stream. And also finally info on both domestically manufactured and imported production value. For imported PFAS, the entity required to confirm whether that imported PFAS is physically present at the reporting site or not. For byproduct information, this rule requires the entity to share info on byproduct name or description, byproduct generic chemical name, byproduct source, byproduct release medium such as land, water, air. If a byproduct is produced unintentionally while manufacturing a PFAS or PFAS formed during a thermal treatment or PFAS formed as a result of disposal, then entities required to share info on the total weight of the byproduct released to all medium in pounds for each year. The next slide covers environmental and health effects information, work exposure info, and disposal method info. This rule requires the entity to share info on all existing information on environment and health effects of PFAS or PFAS mixture. Example, toxicity information, range finding studies, film studies, etc. To share this info to EPA, the entity must use a OECD template which can be downloaded from OECD website. And also, entity can achieve this by using a IUCLD software for exporting the dossier. Then entities required to share info on PFAS health and environmental effects test data. Finally, info on the name of the test method which is used to detect the PFAS. For work exposure info, this rule requires info on the number of workers exposed to PFAS for each industrial process and use and consumer and commercial use. So the entity must share info on work activity description. For example, taking samples of the product for quality testing, unloading PFAS dumps from delivery trucks into different companies, different containers, etc. And also info on the maximum duration that worker is exposed to PFAS, like in hours per day, in days per year, etc. Coming to disposal method info, this rule requires info on the way that PFAS is disposed, such as land disposal, directly releasing into water and air. Then it requires info on the volume of the PFAS that was released to each medium. Finally, it requires info on the total volume of the PFAS that was burned since 2011. If it is occur, this rule requires info on the temperature in degrees Celsius. If it is occurred at multiple temperature, this rule requires info on the minimum temperature at which that PFAS was burned. Next we will see the CBA claim requirements. Under this rule, the entity may claim certain portion of the reporting forms as confidential, such as specific chemical identities that are on the confidential TSCA inventory, then company identifier and production volumes. For claiming certain data as confidential, the entity is required to answer certain questions triggered by reporting tool. If any CBA claims are improperly made, then EPA makes the information available to the public without further notice. And then certain information cannot be claimed as a confidential under this rule. Specific chemical identity, if the PFAS is on the public TSCA inventory, all generic names, LBE numbers, industrial processing and use info, consumer and commercial use info, etc. Certain information can be claimed as a confidential. Maximum concentration can be claimed as a confidential. For environment and health effects, CBA claims for health and safety studies are valid if the entity discloses certain information related to company process and operation. And all other information can be claimed with a proper substantiation. Moving on to duplicative reporting, the EPA states that it is limiting the requirement for reporting duplicative information. If an entity has previously submitted the requested info to EPA through other TSCA program, such as CDR, TRA, etc. Therefore, the entity is not required to re-report the information if it is already reported info to EPA. But this rule requires an entity to submit the data that has not been previously reported, and also for missing years, including previously reported data that doesn't meet the reporting level of this rule. As stated in the slide, the entity must mention the TSCA program so that EPA can locate the info and also which year the data was submitted. As highlighted in the slide, the joint submission can be initiated when the PFAS manufacturer or importer doesn't know the chemical identity and they supplied us but refuse to share it for confidential concerns. In such case, the primary submitter, PFAS manufacturer and importer, can initiate an email to their secondary submitter and ask them to share the chemical identity info directly to EPA. In case when a foreign supplier purchases a mixture under a trade name from another company and doesn't know the chemical components of the mixture, then the secondary submitter can request their territory supplier to share the chemical identity directly to EPA. Next, we will see the conclusion. If any PFAS outside the list, example, EPA chemical dashboard, which meets the structural definition, then it requires then the entity has a reporting obligation under this rule. And there is no exemption in reporting requirement for PFAS as impurities, and there is no minimum threshold limit. If the company recycle and uses the waste that has a PFAS, then the entity has a reporting obligation under this rule. If the entity purchased the PFAS from a domestic source, then the original manufacturer of the substance must info related to the PFAS under this rule. Regarding supply chain, conducting PFAS survey and required to collect info on chemical identity, such as CAS number, chemical name, and then maximum concentration at article level and functional category, purpose of the adding PFAS in the product. Yeah, we APA engineering expertise in environmental compliance with decades of experience. We stay ahead of regulatory changes with our skilled professional team. Our green check is a web-based source model handling REACH, ROSH, Prop 65, TSCA, and much more. And it helps to find paths with no compliance info. And it helps to generate non-compliance reports and send automated emails to vendors. Benefits for your organization using this green check, which includes complete chemical complaints management, declaration letter generation, and a seamless integration with your ERP and PDM. Are you ready to get started with Green Check? If yes, schedule a demo or reach out to our experts at compliance@apengineering.com for tailored consultation and seamless integration. AP Engineering is here to elevate your compliance journey.